Hey, we're all ready to go with another exciting show today. Hi, my name is Roy Canterbury. I'm going to be your host today on Archery Talk 101. And on this podcast, we're going to have a whole lot of fun talking with Tom about the Scrape Rope Company. And before we get started with that, let me let you know how you can listen to the podcast. You can listen to it on Spotify or wherever you catch your podcasts at, as well as you can go out to audible.com and you can catch it there. Just search for Arch Talk 101, and it's free to listen to on Audible. And you can also watch the podcast on my YouTube channel, Learn to Fix It Yourself, where I have not just archery stuff, but all kinds of other stuff out there for you to learn and listen, and, watch and get some good information and watch me sometimes make mistakes and how to fix them. And then you can go out to my profile. Lots of times you'll see I go live on my profile, but probably the best thing to do is join the Arch Talk 101 Facebook group because there we'll get the podcasts up there as well as you have um, bow techs and instructors out there that can help you if you have a problem with your bow setup. Send us a message, get on there and post a message, and if you can take pictures, that helps. If you want a little help with your shooting form, go ahead and take a video on your phone and upload it to the group, and we'll give you some pointers. Now let's get started with the fun, exciting show. Tom, how about if you introduce yourself and tell us a little something about you?
Sure. My name is Tom Fleisher. I live here in southeastern Pennsylvania, about 45 minutes outside of Philadelphia. It's a suburb in Bucks County. I grew up hunting and fishing. I grew up in the central part of the state in a small town about 40 minutes northwest of Harrisburg, a very small rural town. I grew up with hundreds of acres of woods behind my house. So I grew up spending time in the woods, hunting, riding four-wheelers, shooting my bow, fishing in the nearby streams. Just grew up in the 80s, and I was a kid in the 80s prior to cell phones. So if I wasn't playing sports, I was in the woods, hunting, building forts, shooting BB guns, you name it. Just spent a lot of time outdoors. Grew up rifle hunting mainly from the time I was 12. My dad would take me out, and shortly after that, I just kind of began hunting on my own. So I would come home after school and take my Uncle Tom's old Sears and Roebuck 12 gauge shotgun out and hunt squirrels and rabbits and pheasants, whatever was in season at the time. So just grew up, with a passion for being outside and hunting, and that slowly grew into just having a real passion for deer hunting here, the last 10 to 15 years or so.
That's, quite the story. A lot of us get into that as well. Growing up, going out hunting and a lot of pheasant hunting when I was younger. And I remember traipsing through snow deep enough that you take the highest step as you can and sink down to your knees and take the next step and walking through the snow that deep. And we haven't had that kind of snow in a long time, but
Right.
it's always fun being outside doing stuff like that. And, a lot of us started that same way.
Yeah, I wouldn't change it for the world. The way I grew up, where I grew up, the things I was exposed to. I grew up, friends of ours had a deer camp about 40 minutes, 20 minutes away from us. They lived closer to Harrisburg, but I would go up and join them. Here in Pennsylvania, traditionally, our opening day of deer season was always the Monday after Thanksgiving. In recent years, they've moved it to the Saturday after Thanksgiving now to enable more people to partake in the opener, compared to it being on a Monday. But traditionally, like growing up, it was always on that Monday after Thanksgiving. So, the day after Thanksgiving, my dad and I would head up to camp with them. It was a small camp. There was no electricity, no running water. Everything ran off of propane. We listened to the radio. That was our entertainment. And we just, we played cards. We ate well. We, had the camaraderie of just catching up with guys that we didn't get to see all the time. And I'm so glad I got to experience that as a kid, because here in Pennsylvania, at least, the hunting and deer camp culture is huge. A lot of folks have camps upstate that have been kind of passed down from generation to generation. So very fortunate that I was able to experience that as a youth and a young adult. I continued to go there up through college, and until the camp eventually got sold. But yeah, I'm so thankful for that experience that I was able to have, and just those memories I'll never forget.
Yeah, sounds like a good time, growing up, being able to go out and spend time with family and friends, all
Hmm.
like that. That's always a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know you're quite involved with the scrape rope company, and let's say get into that. How did you get started doing that?
Yeah, that's something that just got started. I just got off the ground here back in late March, early April. Uh, the last couple years, I had started experimenting with mock scrapes and creating more mock scrapes, and had run a few rope scrapes over the years, and have used some of the monkey vines, if you will, used some of those as mock scrapes over the years. And this spring, I decided I was going to go all in on rope scrapes this summer, and and this fall. So I have about 12 different properties that I have permission on here in Bucks County where I live. So I figured it's a great opportunity, to put out a bunch of different rope scrapes, and just kind of see what happens. So I was on YouTube and came across a video that Don Higgins did a number of years ago, outlining his rope scrape system and how he does it, when he does it, the locations, the timing, all that stuff. And just kind of really like that. I like his methodology, and kind of like the stuff he puts out. So that's kind of what I based my system on. So I ordered the rope, ordered the material to make a bunch of them for myself. So as I was doing that, I recalled, last year, a guy had reached out. There's another page I help run. It's called the Philly Burbs Bow Hunters. What that page is a page where we highlight people from the area and the suburbs, the surrounding counties around Philadelphia and including Philadelphia. Anytime they harvest a deer, whether it's a buck, doe, or if it's a bear, or whatever the case may be, we kind of share that with everybody else, and as a way of just kind of promoting hunting here in the suburbs, and sharing everybody's harvest. And it's a great page. Everybody gets along. There's no drama, so it's nice. But where I'm going with all that is a gentleman over in New Jersey, Steve Ciasulo, had reached out to our page and sent myself and my buddy 2 bottles of his deer scent. He has Signal 11 lures over in New Jersey, and he makes synthetic based scents because that's what they're required to use in New Jersey as far as any kind of deer scent. So he had sent us a couple bottles of his scent to try last year. Um, I never had a chance to use them because it was later in the season, but I held on to them, and I actually still have them in the refrigerator. So that kind of got me thinking, all right, I'm doing these rope scrapes. There's got to be some scent that would, pair well with it. So I went on his website and started looking at what he has to offer. And along with the standard doe and heat and doe urine, he had a preorbital scent, and he also had, these. It's a thing like scrape nuggets that you can put on the ground portion of the scrape as well. So as I was looking through the rest of his products, like the wheels in my head started turning, and I was like, what, a rope, would go really well with a lot of the products he has to offer. So I reached out to him and asked him if he ever considered adding a rope to his product lineup. And to my surprise, his response was, yeah, absolutely. He goes, people have mentioned it to me over the years. And he goes, as a matter of fact, I use ropes myself. He likes them, he believes in them. And his problem was he just didn't have the time to develop the ropes, come up with the ropes, package it, make them, manufacture them, sell them, the whole kind of aspect of adding a whole new product, because he's busy with, he does some fishing lure stuff, he does some turkey calls, he does deer mineral, he's got a lot of stuff going on year round. So for him to dedicate a chunk of time to working on a new product just isn't likely. So that's when we kind of came to the agreement that I was going to make him some ropes. So he said, make me 90 ropes. So that's what I did. And that's kind of how this whole thing kind of got started.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. You never know how things are going to start.
Yeah, like I said, I was ecstatic, that he had interest in it and believed in it, and it was something he kind of, already believed in and was using. So it was, to me, it was just a natural fit. He's less than 2 hours away from me in New Jersey, so he's fairly local as far as deer scent companies go. Um,
Yeah.
he's synthetic based, so he can be used in all 50 states. You don't have to worry about any kind of issues there. So once I had the ropes made and we were kind of discussing the financials of it, how it was all going to work, like I wasn't sure initially if he wanted to give me a percentage of each kit that he sold. Now, once I made the ropes for him, the I told him, I said, look, you can name them what you want. If you want to come up with a catchy name for the rope, you want to pair it with scent X, Y, and Z, like that's your call. You can come up with whatever kind of literature you want to describe the rope or market the rope, whatever the case may be. Like, it's, once I make it, hand it off to you, it's yours. You can do whatever you want with it. So I wasn't sure how we were going to do the financial end of it. Like I said, if he wanted to give me a percentage of each kit that he sold, or how it was going to work, but he suggested just buying the ropes for me. So I said, that's fine. And I came up with a price, and he bought the ropes. So a couple days later, a light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, all right, well, if Steve is in this position, he's more of a mom and pop kind of, based company. He's in a few local stores here in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And if he's in a position where he's busy and doesn't have time to create a new product and market a new product, I guarantee there's other folks, in that same position.
Right.
So that kind of, led me down a rabbit hole of deer scent companies, deer lure companies. If they didn't have a rope to offer, I reached out to them. And going back to kind of what, prior to getting with Steve, I noticed, like, obviously he liked the rope idea, just didn't have it. But there are a lot of mainstream deer scent companies out there that do have a rope offering. Some of your more like your Tinks, your Code Blue, some of the other companies, they have a package with a scent and a rope that's already been out for, a couple years. So I saw with Steve and his company over there, and after a few more phone calls and messages to folks, I kind of saw a recurring theme where, the more smaller mom and pop stores didn't really have that to offer. So I saw an opening in the space or the industry to kind of fill that void, where I could provide them a rope that would kind of make them an option along with some of the other more mainstream, deer scent companies.
Yeah. What was the name of that website that you said for that guy that had the scents?
Oh, Signal 11 lures.
Okay. Because what I'll do is there we go. I'll put a link to it in the description,
Yeah.
because it'd be nice to be able to, find them and try to remember what they are and catch them there. And it's like, just look up the link. And so I got them, and we can
Yeah.
look at all the different scents he's got. And uh, very good. Ted Nugent's on his page.
Yeah. He's friends with Ted Nugent, and Ted uses his stuff. So yeah, Steve's got he's got a great following on Instagram, Facebook. He's got a podcast going now himself as well. So yeah, he's been great. He was great to work with, and he's where I got started with with this whole rope thing, and kind of like I said, after we had kind of our business arrangement kind of finalized, that's when I started thinking, there's got to be other folks just like him. And to my surprise, the more folks I talked to, the more folks that were receptive to it and on board with it, and were just very excited to be able to add it to their lineup. Because some of the
Yeah.
folks, there's a guy down in Louisiana I'm working with, Tim Thibodeau. He has TT's Buck Wild down in Louisiana. He's been doing it for about 12 years. He's in about 80 stores throughout Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. Very loyal following down there. And this year he was coming out with a new scent, and he wanted something else to kind of go along with it. And he saw my rope as a great option. So Tim was one of, when I after I kind of got everything finalized with Steve over at Signal 11, Tim, was one of the very first guys to get back to me, from my messages I sent to him. And we kind of went back and forth for a period of weeks where he would ask me questions, I would answer them. We just kind of communicated and stayed in communication for, we probably talk once a week at this point. And I've already supplied him with 100 ropes and 100 of the drag rags that I've come out with. So he's excited to be able to add those to his product lineup this year, and he's been a pleasure to work with. And his situation is he actually has his own deer farm, so that keeps him busy. So for me to take that burden off of him by sourcing the ropes, assembling them, packaging them, and then sending them to him, that just takes a huge chunk off of his plate that he can focus on other things.
Yeah. Well, how about if we I'll go ahead and share my screen and we can kind of go through this so those that are watching can see what's going on right now. This is the
Yeah.
Signal 11 site, which is signal11lures.com, and it kind of goes through stuff here. We can just kind of go through the main page. Here's some lures. There's a picture of Ted Nugent holding up um, three different scents there got in his hand, and here's some other stuff for fish.
Yeah.
There's those scrape nuggets that you showed earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll get on here. We'll maybe we can get him on here. He can go through his website a little bit better. But let's take a look at your um, Facebook page, the
Yes.
Scrape Rope Company, and kind of see what we have here. There's a link into your Shopify site as well as an email to email you. The scrape rope company at Gmail.
Yep.
And you got some different posts out here. Let's take a look at this one is your Instagram. I think this is
Correct.
your personal one. Yeah.
Yes.
Hunting Bucks Solo and some of the stuff you have out here. And we'll look at the uh, other one, the Scrape Rope Company on Instagram. It's got some stuff out here. So let's go to this is your Shopify um, site where you have looks like 3 foot scrape rope,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll let you kind of talk through these because you know more about them than I do. I just gonna go by the picture.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward at this point. I offer a 3, 4, and 5 foot scrape rope on there. I believe the 3 foot start at $14.99 and go up, and shipping is free for everything. And I also do the bundle with the drag rags there too, with that you can bundle those along with any of the scrape ropes, and to make it like a kit where you can use the scent drag on your walk into your stand, and you can have the ropes set up. Now, if you notice in that one picture there, the ropes are vacuum sealed. So
Yeah.
what I do, once I assemble the ropes, I start with the rope I use is a jute rope. When I started going down this avenue of starting to make more of these ropes, obviously pure hemp would be my first choice, but it's outrageously expensive and it's super hard to find. So I started doing more research, and obviously hemp rope is a plant-based rope, at just the same as jute, manila, sisal, or cotton rope. They're all plant-based, and at the end of the day, they're all natural fibers. They're all UV resistant. They're all pretty much they all have some similarities. The differences are more minute. And the more I thought about it, if a deer can tell the difference between a hemp rope and a manila rope and a jute rope or a cotton rope, then it's a pretty good deer. So,
Yeah.
obviously my part of my goal in starting my business, and like I said, I know a lot of the big guys in the scent game had rope options and scent options available. So part of what I wanted to be able to do was offer a rope to the mom and pop scent companies at a price point that if they had to turn it over to a retail location that's going to look for 30 to 50% markup on it, they could still do that and still have be in a position where they can make a profit as well as be competitively priced with other options out there on the market. So I do offer bulk pricing for, deer scent companies who order, 50 ropes or more, just to give them a break. And like I said, my goal was to give them a product, kind of take that burden off of them of having to spend the time developing it. They can tell me what length of rope they want, what other specifications they want on it, and I can make it, exactly as they want. And they just have to, pair it. Maybe they have to come up with a label or a name or, some things like that. But the bulk of the work, as far as the rope goes, is done by me. So, like I said, I wanted to create a product that was affordable for them, but they could also mark it up a little bit if they needed to, for sale in a retail, brick and mortar location.
Yeah, that's one of the things, if you got a retail store or if you're trying to do, you need to get a little something out of it. So, having a wholesale pricing scheme is, advantageous because then you can instead of making, if I go, I'm going to order one, you're going to make one.
Right.
By the time you set up to make one, you could probably make 20 or 30 with not much more time.
Right.
So, that makes sense on that. And um, that makes it a little easier, more available to other people as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I've come, like I said, I've come up with bulk pricing for them. And, that working with the deer scent companies now, like I said, Steve over New Jersey and Tim down Louisiana, they were, my first two guys to come on board. And since then, I think I'm up close to 20 different companies that I'm working with now. Uh,
Oh, that's good.
yeah, from Louisiana to the Adirondacks up here in upstate New York and as far west as, Wisconsin, Michigan, a couple folks in Ohio, Kentucky. Um, yeah, I'm, very fortunate to, the ropes have been very well received by, the majority of the folks I've talked to. So, yeah, I'm excited to work with those guys. And there's a guy down in Georgia, Steve Phillips with Phillips Outdoors. He started with 25 ropes, and they, were very well received down there. And he ordered 50 more just a few weeks ago. So, yeah, and what I'm finding too is down south, the concept of the rope is fairly new. A lot of folks down there haven't heard of it or seen it before, so they're very excited to try it out and see what kind of results they get with it. So it's like I said, the timing and the product and the kind of niche opening that I found seems to be working out so far. And like we were discussing earlier about AI, I'm not a businessman. I'm by trade, I'm a state trooper here in PA. I've been doing that for 18 years. So I'm not a businessman, but Chat GPT and other AI functions like that have been, key in me kind of lessening the business learning curve, if you will, as far as like the bulk pricing or marketing pitches or, hey, if I do X, is that a good business move or a smart business move? Things like that. It really just cuts down on the time and energy that I have to put into doing research.
Yeah, and you can go in and say, okay, I have my rope cost me this much, all this stuff. Here's the cost of my materials, and it takes me this long to make one. What would be a good retail price and what would be a good wholesale price? And that because you can make money, you need, if it takes you an hour, you need to get paid for your hour.
That's the thing.
You
Yeah,
know,
that was the trickiest part in all this was taking into account my time, right? Because the time I spend doing the ropes, it's after work, it's before work, and time spending on the ropes is time away from family. So
right.
that time does come with a price. So I need to need to make sure that I'm taking that into consideration whenever I price my product. And like you said, the AI stuff was great in coming up with those prices. And I've kind of settled on, my three. I got my retail pricing, I have my wholesale pricing to, deer scent companies, and then I have, I've also started working with a number of habitat managers as well. So I have a pricing tier set up for those folks, and a code that I can offer them to give out to their clients or whomever it may be that follows them as well.
Yeah, that's always the hard part of a business is trying to do that.
Yeah.
Now I know everybody's listening or watching and says, okay, I know what it is. When and how do I use it?
Okay. Great question. Like I said, mock scrapes, the concept of mock scrapes has been around for a while. A lot of guys have been doing mock scrapes forever. The Wenzel brothers, I believe, were doing them years and years ago. The rope concept, as far as scrapes, also has been around for a little while. And I kind of played into the part of the reason I took the leap into making this a business was it's not a new concept. It's been around. A lot of folks are familiar with it. Some are not, but for the most part, people are kind of familiar with it. If it's not a rope, like I said, it's a vine. People have used a vine or a branch or anything, things like that have made scrapes. So the concept itself isn't earth shattering. It's not brand new. It's been around for a bit. So um, that's why I kind of felt okay, pursuing this further. So, I was in the process of getting all of mine set up here in the spring, and you can pretty much any time after the weather kind of breaks in the spring, that's a good time to get them set up because you want to get them out there ahead of time, kind of let them weather, um, just kind of let the rain, the heat, everything just kind of, let that natural cycle of, take place. Now, the ropes there when you do get the ropes, regardless of whether it's hemp or jute or manila, there is some odor on the rope from the manufacturing process, right? That's kind of unavoidable. So as I was working through this process with Tim down in Louisiana, I would make a rope, I would send it to him, hey, check this out, let me know what you think. So he got the rope, he's like, I like it, it looks great, everything is good, because if it has some kind of odor to it, I said, I know, I'm familiar with that. And, at the time, if you hang the rope soon enough, you get it out in March, April, or May, that's plenty of time. Whatever odor is on it is going to dissipate, just from the rope getting rained on, having, exposure to the sun, et cetera. That odor is going to work its way off. But it just bothered me and it bothered him that odor was on there. So it was like 3 a.m. one night. I'm laying in bed and a light bulb goes off in my head. So like I said, these are natural, it's plant-based fiber, just like cotton. Cotton's, we have cotton shirts, things of that. So I remembered I had an ozone machine that I had used on my hunting clothes at one point to kill the bacteria, kill the odor. And then, you quickly realize that if you have anything elastic in there, it absolutely destroys it. So ozone and elastic are not compatible. So I stopped using the ozone, but I still had the machine. So I was thinking, these ropes are natural fiber, just like a cotton shirt. And if I sweat in a cotton shirt and I threw it in with the ozone, that would kill the odor. So once I got these ropes kind of made, I created an ozone chamber, sealed it up, threw the ropes in there, exposed it to a period of ozone, pulled it out, and that odor was gone. So I did that on a rope, packaged it up, sent it back down to Tim, and he got it. He said, smell's gone, so that that kind of was promising there. So from then on out, that's when every rope I send out is ozone treated, it's vacuum sealed with a silica gel pack, especially this time of year when it's hot and humid out. That silica gel pack will keep any moisture from building up inside of the packaging, thus inhibiting the growth of any bacteria or anything like that. So like, let's say, for example, I send you a rope and you're not going to be able to get out to your hunting property for 2 more weeks, but here we are, just here in Pennsylvania, this week was brutal. It was in the high 90s, very humid. So if you get that rope and it's just kind of hanging out in your garage or wherever the case may be, where you keep your hunting stuff, there's a good chance there could be some moisture built up in there from that humidity. So I put that silica gel pack in there as just an extra step to ensure that no moisture builds up, no bacteria forms on that rope, and that rope remains scent free until you take it to your spot, open it up, and get it hung up in the tree. So go back to circling back to your our original question of what are these, when do we use them? So like I said, ideally you want to get them set up now, this time of year, spring, summer, that way they have time to get out there. As far as adding any kind of scent to the rope or to the ground, you can do that more in September, October if you want, as you get closer to your season openers. But yeah, you want to get them set up now. And as far as mock scrapes go, just like real estate, it's location, location, location. You want to set them up obviously in areas that are well traveled by deer, whether it's off of a main trail or where a couple trails come together, or if there's a corridor that deer travel between bedding and food, or a natural transition area. Like the one area I hunt close by here, there's a really thick area that's bedding, which opens up into a real nice oak flat. So deer always travel on, in transitions. They seem to love traveling right along that edge. So that's a good spot, to set them up. Obviously, field edges, if you're in a situation where you hunt field edges, we've all seen those scrapes along field edges. So, any place where deer is a good place to set up a mock scrape.
That's kind of good. You never know what kind of terrain you have. I know the two properties I have, one is almost all exclusively crops,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a creek that runs through there. So the only trees are basically right at the bank. And some of the recent floods, the banks have kind of fell down. The last one took probably 5 feet of banks away. It's going along, and all of a sudden it washed out underneath it, and the grass stuff just, you can see where it just fell down about 5-6 feet of it just now is lower.
Mm-hmm.
And the other property is the only trees are along the fence line, and
Yeah.
they use it mostly at night, not as much during the day. So with that, how would you set it up, and what would you do to encourage them to come by more during daylight hours instead of the middle of the night?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of folks, and I've had cameras on natural scrapes before, and a lot of the activity is at nighttime until you get into the rut and closer to the pre-rut and the rut. That time you'll get some more daylight activity. Yeah, the main thing a lot of folks use these for, and what I use them for, is just gaining inventory. They're good ways to collect inventory of the deer that are in your area. And I like to hang them lower, about 3.5 foot off the ground. So when right about waist high, on you, that way bucks, does, fawns, all of them can use the rope. And the more deer that use it, the better. And once they kind of take it over, you really don't have to do much maintenance to it as far as adding a preorbital scent or forehead gland scent or anything like that to it. The deer just kind of do it. And the nice thing about my ropes is the attachment method comes already affixed to the rope. So you don't have to worry about taking zip ties into the woods. You don't have to worry about taking paracord into the woods. The attachment comes affixed to the rope. It's a flexible piece of wire that's coated in plastic, so it's not going to poke you. It's not going to jab you. It's not going to poke a hole in your bag or anything like that. And you can just easily twist it around the branch. And the nice thing is, like for me, I have multiple properties that I hunt. So if I want to hang a rope scrape on one property, let the deer use it, I can then easily take it down. And if I want, take it to a different mock scrape on a different property and introduce a whole different dynamic to that area. It's because all the deer in a certain area kind of know who's there, like all the bucks. But at a certain point in the season, or as we get closer to October, November, they've been in their bachelor groups. They know Jim, Bob, and Tony. But then if I bring this different rope in, they're like, wait a minute, who's this cat on here that we don't know? So it gives you the ability to introduce a whole nother dynamic to your mock scrapes.
Get them coming, checking more often to see who it is.
Yeah. So that's one thing that you could possibly do to encourage daytime activity at the scrape. And the location of it may determine how much daylight activity you get. The one natural scrape that I monitored for years was kind of in like a staging area that the deer would travel from the one property onto this property and kind of stage there before going across the road to where there were about a dozen apple trees and some other ag fields. So they would hit this small property, kind of stage there, and then before heading across. But I would get deer checking that scrape on their way to to feed, and then on their way back to bed, and in the early morning hours coming back through. But it wasn't until like the pre-rut and rut that I would get some daylight activity on that scrape. So I think just naturally deer tend to use scrapes more at night for the most part until we get into a certain part of the season.
Yeah, and that's some good information to look at. We've had trail cameras out, and I did catch some during the daylight, but most of them were, like 10 to 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not a place to hang out because there's really not much cover there unless there's corn,
Right.
and there's not corn every year. Some years it's beans, and there's
Hmm.
ones at the alfalfa field, so there's never any tall cover.
Right. Right. Yeah. I had a property I hunted this year that was right next to a huge cornfield, and up until they cut that corn down, the deer were just packed in that corn. That just tends to keep them in, and until that corn comes down, that's where they're going to be because it's food and cover.
Yeah. Yeah, they like the food and cover and get them both at the same time and close to water too else.
Yes, yeah, my fingers are crossed this year that it's going to be soybeans in there. So we'll see. They rotate. They'll do corn, soybeans, and then leave it fallow for a year. However, the one property I hunt, it appears as if they have soybeans in there again, which is interesting to me. But I'm not going to complain. So
Yeah. It gives don't give them much cover, but gives them food.
yes, gives them a ton of food.
Yeah, that's been some really, really cool information. I know I talked to a different guy on one of the podcasts I did, oh, a couple years ago or something, and he had a similar product where he made some ropes and hung them up, and it's kind of interesting, seeing how all this works, and it's kind of nice that you can just fasten them up and put them up so that the end of it is about 3 foot high. That's the kind of the thing that you know can make a difference on how high you put it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. It's I look at these mock scrapes as choose your own adventure, right? You can put the rope a little higher if you want. If you just want mature deer to hit it, you can put it lower to have, all deer hit it. You can experiment with different scents on the rope. You can experiment with different scents or different nuggets or different products on the ground. Some of the scent companies I work with have all different kinds of products. Some have little beads that are filled with doe urine that you can use kind of time release things. Years past, I've used, I think it was Black Widow makes an interdigital gland that comes in a small little plastic vial that you pop the cap open and you kind of push. It's pointed on one end. You just push it into the ground, so it kind of gives that interdigital scent there. So the rope scrape and the use of scents kind of plays off of deer's how they communicate. Like these scrapes are kind of like their community centers. So they all kind of frequent them, and they communicate using their glands. Whether it's the interdigital in their hoof, the preorbital around their eye, the forehead glands, or say they rub their ear on the branch and some earwax or something comes out, or they bite it and they get saliva on it. So that's really how they're communicating with each other and kind of leaving their calling cards.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how they, different parts of the deer have different scents,
Mm-hmm.
and depending on what you're using and what they're doing, and yeah, it's kind of neat to catch them on camera. Going on one of those, I'm gonna have to try that in my area. Get some cameras back out there and see what's going on. And
Yeah, I'm curious to see, once I've gotten a lot of ropes out there and to all different parts of the United States, some I can't wait to see the different levels of activity and deer interaction with them, in Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio versus Louisiana or Kentucky or wherever, because a lot of these scent companies, even though they're smaller mom and pop companies, they have, like I said, they have a very loyal following, and they have, they ship their product everywhere. I'm working with a guy
Yeah.
in Alabama who has, he sends a lot of his product to Western states and all different states you wouldn't really think of, a small, mom and pop company out of Alabama having such a far reach. But yeah, they have really good products. And a lot of these guys, they're in this business because they're passionate about it. They really enjoy it. They've worked on their product, they've honed their product, and they have a very loyal following. And I'm just honored to be working with them. And one of the funnest parts of this whole experience has just been having these conversations with all these folks from all over the country who just love deer hunting and deer and deer scent. And it's been fun.
Yeah, I enjoy talking to archers all over the world, and it's kind of interesting all the different stories. And I like to hear the stories, hunting stories or businesses, what's going on with the business. And there's so much information out there. And that's nice about like having you on here. You can talk about this and you can give us some pointers on how to use it, when to use it, or how low or high to hang it, what you're gonna get from that. And the different scents that you can put on it. And now, would you take one of just hanging out and just leave it with no scent on them, just find it and actually use it, or would you try and put something on it to, on the ground or something by it to get them started at looking at it? Or
Yeah, you can. A lot of companies have products out there you can use to put on it initially. When I first started just doing this for myself, I just went out and hung them, because at that point, treating them with ozone and all that kind of stuff, it wasn't even a thought at that point. So my line of thinking back then was just, all right, just get them hung up. Like I said, I was following Don Higgins and kind of how he did everything, and he gets his set up over the summer, and then closer to the season is when he starts using and applying scent to the ropes. So um, you can certainly, like I said, the cool thing about it is you kind of choose your own adventure. You want to experiment and use a certain scent on some, and experiment and use no scent on one. You can do that as well. And like I said, you can put one up, and once deer start using, you can take that to a different property and expose it to some different deer if you want. And that's the other cool thing about this. Prior to this, I really didn't use deer scent all that much. I had used Evercom. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It's
yeah,
comes in like a deodorant stick kind of form, and it's basically the bedding and the dander and all that stuff from a deer farm, kind of all mixed up with some sort of wax or material added to it to kind of give it a paste like consistency. But I've used that before, and you kind of wipe it on the bottom of your boots as you walk into your stand to kind of give you a little cover scent. But outside of that, I never really was a big deer scent guy. But having all these conversations and talking with people, and it's really opened my eyes to how big of a part of the hunting industry the deer scent business is. It's pretty significant, and I'm glad to be a part of it now.
yeah, there's a lot of information out there, and
Oh
it's
yeah,
hard to decipher.
it
And
is. Yeah, there's so many different things out there, and then it's obviously you have to be familiar with your rules and regulations in your state. What you're allowed to use, what you're not allowed to use. I know there's a big push for obviously CWD is a very hot topic, and that certainly came up with in the conversations I had with deer farmers, because I would say there's probably 3 or 4 folks I work with that actually have their own deer farms and raise their own deer and package and bottle the urine from those deer and sell it. Um, the CWD is it's a very hot topic right now, and there's a lot of guys out there that have synthetics. There's a company in West Virginia I'm working with, Buck Wild Synthetics. They've been doing synthetics for about 20 to 25 years now. So they're one of the original guys to start making synthetic deer scent. So um, I'm looking forward to kind of experimenting myself this year with a combination of some natural deer scent and some synthetic just to see, what kind of results I get. You know.
Yeah, and you know we've done this and don't do it a lot, but we had a buck and we actually collected the urine from the buck itself because that's natural. That's they're going to be used to that, and
Yes.
then you can use that to spread around in different places and make even though the buck is gone because you killed it, and now you can still have that scent out there,
Yeah.
and it might attract other bucks or it might deter them,
Yeah. And
depending
in
on
years,
if he was the meanie.
yeah, exactly. In years past, I would harvest the buck and cut the tarsal glands off and save those. I would throw them in the freezer, and then I would give them to my brother-in-law or somebody like that to use who hunted in a different area. He could use them, just kind of hang them out or use them as a scent drag or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, it gives you the opportunity to introduce that whole intruder buck, mentality with like, hey, who's this deer in here now?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very interesting. Like I said, it's and a lot of people in discussing, I think Tim down in Louisiana, he mentioned the fact that like when a deer goes to the bathroom, like they don't just go a little bit. Like when they urinate, they go a good bit, a good amount,
Right.
and so like a lot of folks think, all right, if we just put like one or two drops out, that's going to be enough, and one of the things I found in talking with all these folks is like, don't be don't be afraid to be generous with it, because that's how deer actually are. The deer is not going to go and urinate like one or two drops. They're going to urinate a few ounces. So a lot of folks are, obviously you don't want to waste it all, but you can probably be a little bit more liberal with it in your application than what you would think. If you're trying to, obviously you're trying to mimic, a real deer, scenario situation where deer feel that other deer have been there and feel they want to, obviously they feel comfortable there. So,
Yeah. Well, just think how much you go when you go.
right.
You don't do just a couple of dribbles.
Yeah. And obviously, like us as humans, we feel more comfortable going to the bathroom in certain areas more so than others, right? Like obviously in our home, we're most comfortable versus on the road at a gas station, let's say, so
Yeah.
obviously, I would think, the same would kind of apply to deer. They're gonna go to the bathroom where they feel most comfortable, and that could be in an area in the woods where they feel safe, and that's what we want. We want to create that feeling of them being, comfortable and safe while they're in the area we want them to be in.
That's some good information there. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's stuff that we don't always think about, and that's um yeah, that's got a lot to do with, in your area, how many deer do you have in the area? How often do you see the same deer? And if you're catching the same deer all the time, like the one year I had three different bucks, a nice sized one and then two little smaller ones, and you'd see them just about every time you'd seen kind of both together,
Mhm.
and I cut them on one of the videos on my trail cameras, had them out there, and two of the little ones were just kind of sparring a little bit,
Uh-huh.
not really fighting. They were just kind of playing because they were just little things,
Yep.
and it was kind of cool to see that. And I posted that video on my YouTube channel just because it's something cool.
Oh yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
always you don't always get to see that, and that's
No.
nice about trail cameras.
Oh, they're, yeah, especially and the last couple of years with the evolution of the cell camera, that it's all, you almost can't find SD cameras anymore. Everything is pretty much cell cameras. A couple of years ago, I started using the Moultries, the Edge series cameras, and I absolutely love them and have had good results with them. Captured, a lot of great videos, like that one scrape I was telling you about. It's literally, it was less than 20 yards away from a house. The lady's garage was right there. There was a big blowdown right there. So the deer, it created, a safe kind of sense for the deer. Um, it was on a small, 3-acre parcel of land that was kind of situated in between bedding and food. And just this past last year, that chunk of land got sold, and there's now a home on it. So that scrape is no longer. But I have so many great videos of bucks hitting that scrape, does hitting that scrape and urinating in the scrape, bucks fighting at that scrape. Yeah, just so many videos that I have from there that, and unfortunately that scrape is gone now, but that's life in the suburbs here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of disadvantage when you're in the suburbs.
Yeah, the small pockets of woods that, used to hold deer, you'll drive by and you'll see a sign in there that they're going to build, two or three, $1 million homes in there. And it's tough, especially out here where we're at. It's a very, the area is growing rapidly, and the habitat that we have isn't enough to support the amount of deer that we have. I don't think people realize how much deer actually eat and what an acceptable number of deer are for, given number of acres. Because, here in Pennsylvania, our terrain is pretty varied. Where I'm at, it's relatively flat. There's small pockets of woods. Most of the parcels I hunt are anywhere from 3 to 10 acres or so, give or take. And you go up to our northern, tier of our state, and it's much more expansive. It's a lot of public lands, a lot of big woods, a lot of mountains, things like that. So people go up there, and historically, people will go up there, and they may only see 2 or 3 deer in a week, and instantly they equate that to there not being any deer there. There's no deer here. But in fact, the number of deer they're seeing probably is correct for that area, based on the number of deer and the amount the habitat can sustain. So like I said, the bottom line is you can't always equate with, the number of deer that you're seeing. That doesn't mean that that's not a good population for that area. Down here, like I said, there's an overabundance of deer. We're in a special regulations area where our seasons are very liberal. We start the end of September and go all the way through the end of January, with a little 2-week break there around Christmas time. But, obviously I had one property last year. I took 4 does off of it and could have easily shot another 4, because they're there. And, when the does find a place with food, they're going to stay there. They don't,
Right.
there's food and bedding, like they have no need to go anywhere else. So, they just, between that property and the adjoining property, there's plenty of food and bedding for them. So they're just there.
Well, the area will only support so many deer,
Yeah.
and the herd will get thinned down to that area, that amount, one way or another.
Yes.
Either by us hunters killing them and eating them,
Mm-hmm.
or by diseases killing them and going to the coyote food.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And the last thing you want, is to have a deer kind of naturally starve and end up being prey to a coyote or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, I think somewhere deer will eat. I want to say it's like 3,500 pounds of browse in a year. Like, it's a lot. Like, the amount of food they consume in a year is way more than you would ever think. And
Yeah.
it's people. I don't think people realize, how much they eat or how much they need to eat to remain healthy. And like, for example, down here where I'm at, there's some ag fields, so they have ag to eat. There's a lot of homes nearby, so they have access to hostas and arborvitaes and whatever kind of plants people, landscape plants they help themselves to. So there's plenty of food. Like I said, they're getting corn, they're getting soybeans, all that kind of stuff. And like I've done mineral sites. I've tried the trophy rock minerals, and down in my area, the deer really don't use them all that much. And I think it's because they have such a wide array of food in their diet already down here that they don't necessarily need that, or they're not lacking any type of mineral. But you go into the upper tier of our state where it's more hardwoods, more mountainous terrain, and the deer are kind of relying on browse and acorns are the mass crop, depending on how good the mass crop is that year. Like up there, the deer will hammer the mineral stuff just because I think they're a little more deficient compared to the deer down here where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, always heard, deer eat 2 tons of food a year.
Yeah.
And, you're saying 3,500, which is roughly about your 2 tons. So,
Yeah.
um, when you get somebody, it's like they start feeding them, like in the areas where they start feeding them. It's like, well, you're going to feed them, and then they're going to start having two offspring instead of one, right?
Yeah.
Because more nutrition. Now, then you got three the next year, and
Hmm.
then say one of them's a buck. So now the next year you get two, and the next year you get four. So each year you're going to double. So you're going to start off with 2 tons of food a year, then go to 4 tons, then 8 tons, 16 tons. Do you want to feed that deer or not?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It just rapidly expands. Like I said before, you have 16 deer on a property that can really only sustain four.
Yeah.
Right. And
Or even one,
right. Yeah. 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 It's crazy, but um, yeah, like I said, down here where we're at, it's a very liberal season, which I'm thankful for, because it gives me the opportunity to shoot a lot of deer. And I always tell people if you want to get good at shooting deer, like the best way to do it is to shoot more deer. That's the only way you're
Right.
proficient at it. And down here where we're at, you have that opportunity. So like it's been great. Like I said earlier, when we first got started, I grew up rifle hunting, and that's predominantly what I did all the way into my 30s and 40s, early 40s. I always rifle hunted. Even when I went away to college, I went to college up in East Stroudsburg, which is up in the northeastern part of our state. We had access to the Delaware Water Gap, which was all public land. So myself and several buddies, we continued to hunt up there during rifle season, and we had a blast doing that. And even after college, I came home and continued to rifle hunt with some buddies on their farm. And then about 10 years ago, we moved to our current location, and that's when I kind of got back into archery. Because I realized, where we were, started looking at the seasons and realized how, liberal the archery season was. So I got back into archery about 10 years ago. And at the time, my kids were 9 or 10 years old. So they were involved in all kinds of school stuff, sports, you name it. So at the time I bought a crossbow because I was like, what's the easiest way for me to get back in the sport without having to devote, hours to shooting a compound and things like that. So bought the crossbow and hunted with that for a few years. And it was great, shot a lot of deer, but always wanted to get back to a compound. So about 4 years ago, I got back into a compound, and I really enjoy doing 3D shoots during the summer. And at a lot of places, you can't use a crossbow. Some places now you can, but for the by and large, they're pretty much compound bow only. So I got back into using a compound, like I said, about 4 years ago, and I'm absolutely ate up with that now. So I'm at the point now where I'd rather shoot a deer with a compound than a rifle, any day of the week. So
Yeah, I've shot way more deer with a bow than I have with a rifle. I
yeah.
think um, maybe two, maybe three deer with a rifle and one moose.
Okay.
Um, I got two deer in this same night, right back to back with my bow.
Yeah.
So that one hunting trip, I almost shot as many with a bow as I had with a rifle.
Yeah. That's a great night when you can double up with your bow. That's fantastic. I remember last year, I usually hunt by myself, and that's why my Instagram page is Hunting Bucks Solo. So Bucks County is where I live. I enjoy hunting bucks, and I hunt solo by myself, 99.9% of the time. But last year I did bring a good friend of mine out with me to my one property, and I got him set up, and I hunt out of a saddle. So what I'll do is on a lot of my properties, I'll preset sticks. So that way I can just go in, climb, set my platform, get my tether hooked up, and I'm ready to go. So he also hunts out of a saddle. So I got him to one of my trees I had prepped, and I went to the other side of the property and got set up there. So and we hunted in the morning, didn't see anything. Went back to that same property in the afternoon and got set up in their, same locations. And We were up there for a short period. He shot one, and then a little bit later, he sends me text that there's two coming my way. So two came towards me. I shot one of those, and we were each able to double up on that same hunt. So that was pretty cool.
Twice work getting the deer out though.
It was. We down here I use a jet sled, which is commonly used for ice fishing,
Yeah.
to carry stuff out onto the ice. But the jet sleds are a lifesaver because they will go over any kind of log, rock, debris. They just kind of glide through the woods like very little friction. The only thing that they don't go as smooth on is grass. They have a little bit more resistance on grass, but like leaves, down trees, rocks, they just kind of go over and the deer kind of stand there nice and secure. So yeah, the jet sled is a lifesaver down here. Me and my buddies have been using those for years to get our deer out.
Yeah, anything to make it easier.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You
And
know, the old deer carts work pretty good, and
yeah.
they've got some now that you can put on your back and carry them in.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen one. It's actually a tree stand. It has wheels on it. So when you come out, you just set it up to be a deer cart and haul your deer out. And
That's pretty slick.
yeah, those kind of neat.
Yeah. Yeah. That's if you want to find out what kind of shape you're in, just drag a deer for a little while.
Yeah.
That'll tell you.
Of course, the two properties I have now, we can drive the four-wheeler up to
Uh,
them, pretty much. So not a lot of dragging.
no, work smarter, not harder.
That's right. Especially when you get older, it's like I'm not pulling the deer very far.
Yeah. No. The jet sleds they do make it a lot easier, so that's good. And you can bring the deer, your bow, your whatever you need to bring out with it, your backpack. You can load it all in one trip and be right out. And then the nice, like I said, I do suburban hunting here, so most times I can see my truck from my tree. That's the area I'm hunting in. That's just the way it is, and I that's the kind of the cards I'm dealt down here, and it is what it is. But the deer are here, and I love hunting them.
Yeah, that's nice when you have the property and there's a lot of, here in Nebraska, there's a lot of public property you can hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, early season you might have contend with a lot of hunters out there, but later season a lot of them don't go out just because it's too cold and that's the time to go out.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like our late season is great down here because obviously we can bait here in Pennsylvania in the special regs area, like where I'm at in the Philadelphia and surrounding areas, and out in Pittsburgh and the surrounding areas out there. The special regs area out there, you can bait just because of the population of deer and things like that. So here, if you want to run a feeder in late season, obviously late season deer are all about food. So if you have some tags to fill and you have a property where you can run a feeder, it's a great time to take advantage of that and fill the freezer because here we will eat as many deer as I shoot. If I kill six, we'll eat six. If I kill eight, we'll eat eight. That there's none of it goes to waste. Either we eat it or it gets donated or given to friends.
Yeah, I know once you learn how to cook it and ways to prepare it, then you go through a lot more. I know the first couple deer I got, one deer would last us a whole year because
Right.
we didn't know how best way to cook it or anything else. And then once you learn how to do it, and then you learn things that the whole family likes,
Oh yeah.
like jerky. We got a sauce out of Texas called Clods. It's a
Mhm.
beef brisket marinade,
Ooh,
and we marinate. Oh yeah, it's good.
I'll have to
Uh,
check.
we we marinate the beef in there, and at the time I had one of those vacuum sealer canisters that you could put them in, vacuum seal it, and then let it out, and it sucks it inside the meat, and
Yeah.
we'd stick it in a dehydrator
Ooh,
and make jerky out of it that way. And I remember one year I had freezer full of moose, I had freezer full of deer. I had no room for another deer.
right.
We made jerky out of the whole deer. That deer lasted maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. It goes fast.
Yeah, the kid's like, "Oh, is it ready yet? Is it ready yet?" No, I just stuck it on a few hours ago. It's not ready yet.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll get my butcher to like take a hind and just slice one of the hinds down. He'll slice it nice and thin, and I'll make my own jerky, here at the house with a dehydrator. But yeah, the most functional is just the ground meat or the burger, because you can use it for obviously burgers, lasagna, tacos. I just eat the ground burger on its own, for lunches and things like that. I'll cook up
Yeah,
a pound of the ground burger, add some seasoning and some cheese to it, and it's just a great source of protein. Like, it fills you up. It's healthy for you. Yeah, you just can't beat venison. It's one of the best proteins out there.
yeah. And I had one time I got a deer. The best cut of meat I've ever had was the tenderloins from that deer. I put them on the grill, and you kind of you roll it a little bit and turn around, and I took my fork and I stuck it in the tip and cut a piece off and ate it. Stuck in the other tip, cut it out and ate it. I'm eating it as it's cooked because it's always thicker in the middle, so
Yes.
the ends cook first. So I'm
Mhm.
I'm eating it as it's still a little medium rare in there, and I'm eating it as it's going. It's like, yeah, I couldn't stop eating it. It's like
Oh
as
yeah,
soon as it got ready, I put the fork in and cut it off and eat it.
yeah. You like your meat medium or medium rare, or even,
Medium rare, yeah.
yeah, that's nothing beats venison cooked that way. Like your chops, tenderloins, yeah, you name it. I'll take one of the hinds, and my guy will slice it down into almost like cheesesteak meat, very thin, thin slices, and we cook that up and eat it as a cheesesteak, or you can throw it on a pizza, make a cheesesteak pizza, chip steak. He'll slice it down into, like, small chips, and you can't beat that. Just he'll make like pork roll, a venison pork roll, which is outstanding. So there's so many different things you can do with it, bologna, sticks, you name it. But I try not to get too much of it processed. I like the chops, tenderloins, and the ground meat. That's pretty much my go-to.
Yeah, and I always process it myself just because I know it's my meat. I
Hmm.
know how it was prepared. I cut it in the sizes that works best for, my family
Yeah.
and the ground is always the part that you don't normally want the butcher to do the ground for you because they're going to grind, they're going to have some tendons in there, they're going to have some of the membrane on there. They might get a little fat in there because they're not going to be as careful. And
Hmm.
then when you have ground that has the deer fat in it, it smells bad and it tastes bad because you do not want to eat any deer fat at all.
You don't. No.
And when in mine, I had one of the small little hand crank ones,
Hmm.
and I was constantly pulling that thing off, pulling all the memories out. So I had 100% meat. There was no tendons in it because they wouldn't get cut up. There
Right.
wasn't any of that membrane on it because it wouldn't go through and chew it up. Then I got a little bit bigger one, and it's still kind of the same thing. And then now I have an electric one. Actually, my son has it, but the electric one will chew that stuff up. So you got to make sure you clean it a little bit better
Yeah,
when you
a bit better.
go in there. But some of that membrane on there is you don't even notice it when you're eating it.
Right.
But into the tendons you will,
Hmm.
the fat you definitely will. So
Oh
you just
yeah.
want to cut all that off. That's
Yes.
kind of a little tip for those that are processing it yourself. And you know, you might want to just tell the butchers like just the stuff that don't fit into steaks or roasts, just give it to me whole like that, and then trim it yourself. And you get them. Grinders are pretty cheap.
Yeah.
You can get a hand grinder for what you're doing and grind it up, and you don't have to buy a big expensive electric one. But sometimes we process enough deer that it's nice to have the electric one.
Yeah. A good buddy of mine just moved into my neighborhood, and he has been processing his own deer for the last several years now, and he just kind of continually adds to his collection of items. He's got the tubs, he's got the knives, he has the grinder, he's got the slicer, he kind of has all that stuff. Like, and for me, it's more of a convenience to be able to take it. And I the processor I use, I'm very good friends with him. I've known him for a number of years. And for me, it's just a convenience and time saving factor, because
Right.
if I sometimes I have to get up early for work. If I get in late from hunting, the last thing I feel like doing is, spending 2, 3 hours, butchering a deer. So it's more convenient to just drop it off there. And it does get pricey though after a while. So I think this
Yeah.
my buddy is in my neighborhood. I think we're going to try to do some processing, on our own if we can, if time will allow. But and the other hand, like he's local, he's in my area, so I don't mind supporting a business that's located in a small business in my area.
Right.
I don't mind paying the money if I have to.
Well, and we come across a little trick that we discovered by accident one time. We had the deer and dragging it out. It got kind of dirty and muddy, and so we just wanted to clean it up so that we didn't have, as we pull it in the garage and hoist it by the back legs, we didn't want to have all that messing around with that dirty and stuff in there.
Hmm.
And we hosed the inside out because it's a little bit bloody. We hosed the outside out, got it all clean, and we went to take the hide off. It just pulled right off.
Huh.
As like soaked the hide. Ever since then, we soaked the hide, and if you see normally between the hide and the meat, as you're pulling it, it kind of sticks, and
Hmm.
it just kind of really you got to really pull hard or cut
Yes.
it. Soak the hide, and then when you pull it down, it kind of separates between the hide and the meat. It separates. You can pull it down real easy.
Interesting. Yeah, I've done it before. We kind of have to, you got to fight with it and kind of work it down in stages. Yeah, I've never even thought about that. That's great.
Yep. Hose it down before you hang it, and then it'll come off so much easier.
Okay. Yeah. Now the one farm I used to hunt with my buddies, they raised cows, so they had a refrigerator in the barn. So anytime they butchered their steers or whatever, they could always just hang the meat. So after we would shoot our deer, we would bring them down to the barn. We had the tractor with the front end loader. We would raise them up, and we would actually skin them and then gut them. They had one of the big buckets that they could just roll underneath. So we
Yeah.
would skin them, gut them, and then go from there right into the refrigerator. Let them hang for 3-4 days, and then we would cut them up a couple days later. And that if you have the opportunity to let them hang like that for a couple days, if you have refrigerator space, great. If not, if the weather's cool enough for you to hang them outside and nothing is going to get to them, that's letting them hang for a couple days kind of lets the muscle kind of relax and makes it a lot easier to cut up than it is initially.
Yeah. And if you don't have that, get it deboned and meat and just stick the meat in the refrigerator and that way you've got some time to do it.
Yes.
I know what I went up Canada moose hunting. I got a moose and we brought it back in coolers and I'm cutting it up myself. And moose is, you know, the moose with the bones was over 500 pounds.
Hmm.
That's without the head and the hide.
Yeah,
And that
just
was another 130 pounds. But and I'm cutting it up, and I could tell the meat, the color and texture a little bit changed by the time I got that week
yeah.
to get to the last of it. It actually changed a little bit.
Hmm.
But I wasn't going to let it sit there in the coolers, on ice,
Right.
because I didn't have a refrigerator big enough to hold them all until I got it all deboned and cut up and
Hmm.
packaged. And we had it in a deep freeze that basically never you don't go through defrost cycle.
Right.
And was going through it, and it's like I found something that's like 5-year-old meat, perfectly good
Wow, that's excellent.
because it was frozen, never thawed.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's the part that will make your meat go bad is the thawing and refreezing.
Yes.
That's why if you have a refrigerator freezer, a defrosted one that defrosts, your meat's going to last you 2-3 months, and you're going to push the limit. By
Yeah.
about 6 months, it's already going to be bad because it's thawed and freeze, thaws and freeze. But if
Hmm.
you put it in a deep freeze, the chest ones are better because the stuff on the bottom never gets any warm on at all.
Right.
And then you can last it for a long time. I've heard a story where they found, I forget what the animal was, like in the Arctic, where it's never thawed out,
Hmm.
and the meat was still good. It'd been there for hundreds of years. It was
Yeah.
frozen, never thawed.
Huh.
And they were digging in the ice and stuff and come across it and
Yeah.
still perfectly good.
Very good. That's another great tip. If you can get your stuff in a deep freezer, then that's the way to go. A chest freezer versus a refrigerator style freezer.
Yeah. And the upright freezers, they're okay, but there's too much. air around them. So as you open the door up, they're all getting a little heat on there and closing them. That's
Hmm.
not really thawing them, but it's that temperature change where the chest, the only thing that's getting warm is the stuff on the top.
Right.
Yeah, and you don't have open that long. It's not like you're trying to defrost them. At
Right.
some point, you're going to have to defrost them, and then you got other things you got to do. You got to get them in the freezer someplace, and there were a refrigerator freezer someplace just to keep them cold and defrost it quickly and get them
Yep.
back in there. But um,
Yep. Ideally,
so
we go through it quick enough. We don't have to worry about it going bad. So,
yeah, yeah, that's a good thing. Go through it quick enough.
yep.
Yeah, it's a lot of good information on this one. I know I learned a little bit more about the scrapes and how to use the ropes and stuff like that, and um, the type of rope to use.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
a-
There's all,
anybody can make one, except how do you buy just a 3 foot piece of rope? It's going to cost you more to get that one rope than it would be to just buy them already made.
right. Yeah. I take that burden off of, off of people's hands, not only for, the guys with their own deer scent companies, but hunters as well. Like I said, you're getting a quality handmade product that, I make each rope by hand. I use a heat shrink on it so that the ends of the rope are not going to come undone. It's not going to fall apart on you. Like I said, my attachment method is easy. It comes affixed to the rope, so you don't have to go into the woods with cord or zip ties or string or rope or anything like that. Everything is right there. So, and like I said, they're scent free until you open them and expose them to whatever scent you want to expose them to. And they come with a pair of nitrile gloves. I throw a pair of gloves in there too. That way, after you open it, you pull the rope out, and if you want to apply scent to it, number one, it keeps any human scent off of the rope, and number two, you can use those gloves uh, so that when you do apply urine or preorbital scent or whatever scent may be, you're not going to get that on your hands. Nobody wants to get deer pee on their hands or anything like that. So the gloves are a nice little touch that I throw in there, and like I said, they're vacuum sealed and they'll remain scent free until you want them to take on whatever scent that you want to add to them. So it's a nice product. It's packaged up nicely, and it's something that you can it's small, it's compact. You can throw it right in your bag, take it into the woods, and not have to worry about bringing a bunch of other stuff with you to hang it up and get it up and running.
Yeah, that's always the thing. It's like, oh, how much do I got to carry with me? Do I got to carry something to fasten it with? And this way, you just go up there and wrap that wire around it, and it's going
Yeah,
to stay there. And unless you have some really strong winds, you're probably not going to get pull it off.
yeah. And that's the rope I use is a 1 inch in diameter rope, so it's a little thicker rope. I've seen ropes out there that are 1/2 inch in diameter, a little smaller. I like the thicker rope just because it's a better visual. The deer are going to see it a little bit better. I take the bottom 5 inches of my rope. It's kind of frayed out at the bottom, so that's where you can apply, the scent of your choosing to. Um, and then as far as the ground portion of the scrape, you can use a stick or a rock, but part of having a good successful mock scrape is getting that ground portion of the scrape prepared properly. So like I said, you want to use a rake or a stick or something, whatever you use, you want to make sure that it's cleared off good. There's no rocks or pebbles or anything like that in there, any roots or grass sticking up. Like, make sure you kind of get it all cleared out, get it nice and worked up. Kind of make it look nice, just like you were getting ready to plant something or it's your flower bed. You want it to, you want it to look nice because that's what the deer prefer. And then what I do is I have a spray bottle of water that I'll bring with me before I add any scent or anything like that to it. I'll kind of mist it and get that soil damp because what that moisture does just kind of holds scent a little bit longer and kind of makes that scent more pronounced. Because if you talk to a good friend of mine has a deer, he has a dog that he uses to track deer, and I've used him several times over the past couple of years for deer that I knew. Let's say I knew the shot was back, and I didn't pursue the deer, and we waited till the next day to track it, or shots where I knew the shot was good, and he just wanted to come out and use his dog to get experience. So in working with him, I got to learn about a lot about, how the dogs utilize scent and how they track and what they do. So the dog, let's say you're in an area, obviously there's more than one deer in the area. So how does the dog know which deer track to follow? And that comes down to that interdigital gland, that gland as that hoof is hitting the ground, especially on a wounded deer, it's releasing odors and pheromones and hormones and different kind of, obviously that the adrenaline for that deer is pumping, and all this stuff is physiologically going on with that deer after it's hit, and it's releasing different odors. So that's how that dog knows which deer to go after. And like I said, in talking with my buddy, a lot of people are concerned that, oh, I shot the deer, now it's going to start raining. How are we going to, it's going to wash away the blood. We're not going to be able to see any blood, the blood trail it. That's not a concern with the dog, because they don't necessarily follow the blood. They follow the odor of that particular deer. So, and what the rain does, it actually, like I said, that moisture enhances the odor and makes it really easy for the dog to follow that track. And same thing in the wintertime. Let's say you shoot a deer and there's a heavy frost that night. The frost itself will kind of encapsulate the odor. And then once that the sun comes up and that frost starts to melt, that's when it's like the optimal time to run the dog on that track, because that moisture kind of reactivates that odor, that scent, to make it really, kind of stick out to the dog. So I apply that same principle to my scrapes. Hit it with a little spray bottle, make it kind of damp, and then get your scent in there, and that just kind of helps enhance it, and will kind of keep it in there for a little bit longer. And back to the dog tracker, like the worst days, the hardest days for them to track, or the days when it's really hot and warm outside, because that's when scent kind tends to dissipate, at a much faster rate. So for guys, tip what I do is whenever I need to go in and check cameras or change batteries in a camera, ideally like midday when it's warm out is your best time to go in versus when it's raining. Obviously a heavy torrential downpour for a couple of days is going to wash away some odor, but if it's just a normal rain, your odor is going to stick around in there. So like the best day to go in and check your batteries or pull your cards or whatever the case may be is, when it's fairly hot and warm outside, because your odor is going to dissipate a lot faster on those days.
Something to think about. I never even thought about,
Yeah.
that part of it.
Yeah. Like I said, just having, my buddy have, his dog, and just being able to pick his brain and figure out how they work and how they, because obviously they're, the next best thing to a deer's nose is probably a dog's nose, and one of our canine officers told me once, if we walk into, if I walked into your house and your wife was making, soup, I walk in and I smell, I smell chicken soup, or I smell tomato soup. When a dog comes in, that dog can smell the oregano, the salt, the basil, the tomato, the paprika, whatever. The dog can pick out all the different, ingredients of that, where we just kind of smell, we smell soup, they smell every single ingredient in that, so, once you kind of know how their noses work and things like that, and especially with the moisture and the rain, that it gives you a little bit different perspective, some things to consider.
Yeah, that's I always, heard dogs' noses are really good. They can sometimes track somebody that's in a car going down the road. They
Mm-hmm.
can still track them,
Yeah.
because there's a little bit of scent they're leaving. Um, Now, if you're driving at 85, 90 miles an hour, that might be a little more difficult. But
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's definitely hard to fool a dog's nose,
Yeah.
because they can track you pretty good.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Maybe if in a river itself, you might have a chance, but
Right. Yeah, you hear stories all the time. Guys would go into their stand. Next thing you know, an hour or so later, their dog winds up at the base of their tree.
yeah.
It's amazing how they can, hone in on that stuff. But yeah, amazing. They're amazing creatures, just like deer.
Oh, yeah. And I've when you have a drag that you're kind of dragging a rag behind your boot, and you get to the base of your tree, and next thing you know, this deer is following you and follow the tree where you stopped and looks up. They're just following the scent up the tree.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I believe that, deer by their nature are curious, to an extent. Like they if they don't feel like they're in danger, they're going to investigate or check things out. Like I don't know how many times I've had younger deer, bucks especially, walk right up to the base of my tree and start smelling my climbing sticks that I've used to climb up the tree. And then they start smelling them, then they start looking up, and eventually they see you and figure out, "Oh, I probably shouldn't be here." And then they turn and run away. But yeah, a number of times I've had deer come right up to that, right up to the base of my tree. Like, so as it's kind of where the rope comes in. It's they can see it. So, like I said, deer by their nature, I think, are curious, and they're, it's something for them to come and check out. And it just mimics that licking branch that, they often, use, when they make their own scrapes. So it's a tool. It's not foolproof. Just because you hang a rope up doesn't mean you're going to have, 50 deer use it, or have a 180 show up and start using it. You may hang two or three up on a property, and the deer may use one of them, one of those scrapes. So
Yeah.
that's just the way it is. It's a tool, just like, anything else that we may carry into the woods with us that we feel, gives us an edge. It's just something to use and try out. And if you have success with it, that's great. And if you don't, you can move on to something else if you desire.
Yeah, I know last time, so when I was using a drag, I drag it up to my stand, walk past it, and then I'd hang it on a branch or something on the opposite side. So they stick their nose at looking away from me. And
Yeah.
then that's the stronger scent. And then I go climb up my tree, and then they don't follow you up the tree because the scent continues on and goes over and stops.
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing. Like, you can get creative with it if you can make a circle if you want, or you can do whatever. And the drag rags I use a piece of the paracord I use is reflective. So if you do, just like you said, if you get to your stand and you want to hang it in a tree and you hunt until dark, when you climb down, all you got to do is hit it with your flashlight because it's reflective. You'll be able to go right to it, or, and that's, if you want to use that, for your ropes or just as a trail marker or whatever the case may be. Like, if you want to send somebody else into a stand location, you know, you can use that as a marker if you want. But you always want to take that out with you when you leave, at night.
Carry your baggie along with you, stick it in the baggie. So
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Exactly.
I even taken, a hunk of the hide and cut a little slot in it and tie a little rope on it and use that and hang in a branch and stick some scent on.
Yeah.
And then if you end up forgetting it, you got plenty of hide, cut another piece off.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's like I said, you can choose what you want to do and try something. If it works, great. If not, you can try something else, and until you find something that works for you. But
Yeah, I'll have to definitely gonna have to try that a little bit this year, and I probably have to hump the crossbow this year because I don't think I can pull my compound bow back yet. And had a couple of um had heart surgery and had a bypass, and then a year ago, and then here um just about a year after that, guy decided he didn't want to even slow down. He hit me going at least 65, and I was about 29 getting ready to turn, spun me around, and increased my speed to 40 mile an hour backwards.
ooh,
So yeah, I'm still suffering from that. But
uh, so
um yeah, so if I hunt this year, it's gonna have to be the crossbow because I don't think I want to try and pull a trigger on the rifle, and I don't think I can pull my bow back.
yeah, as
Not yet.
long as you're
Gonna
able
be
to
a while.
anything, as long as you're able to get out there, then enjoy the outdoors. That's all that matters.
Yeah, I got to put my cameras, pull my cards out and see what was on it from last year. And the one time I pulled them out, it's like for some reason, every one of my cameras were off.
Oh,
I thought I turned them on, changed the card. I thought I turned them all on, and kind of find out there was no pictures on any of them. I was like, oh man, the only
yeah,
picture was me walking up to change the card.
right. Oh, well, better luck this year.
Yeah. Well, you'd mentioned something about a discount code.
Yes, yeah,
Now would be a good time to offer those that have listened the whole time,
yeah,
to offer them a discount code. I'll let you kind of explain the details on it. And
yeah. What I'll do is I'll set up a code. We'll make it AT 101 for Archery Talk 101. So the code will be AT 101. You can enter that at checkout. That will get you 10% off your order at the Scrape Rope Company through the Shopify store. And you can link to that either through my Instagram page for the business or the Facebook page for the business. So it'd be AT 101.
okay, I'll do that. And I'll actually put a link right to that in the Spotify link in the description. And then right there, you look at that description right there for the or the link for the um, was it Shopify?
Yes.
I've been talking too much here. For the Shopify, and I'll put the code underneath it, put that in checkout, save it 10%. And that's kind of a thank you for listening to us talk all this time and or
Yeah.
watching, and that'll get you a little something extra, and try them out. And if you do get them and try them out, hey, let us know. How did it work out for you? I'm sure you'd like to know, and I'd definitely like to know, different situations, what your situation was. I'd describe it, and I may take some videos of my area, and then I'll put some up, and then we take some, the trail cam pictures, and see what's going on, and see what they're doing, and kind of, see how good it works, and different ideas, and maybe my situation is same as yours, and I get mine to work, and or I don't get mine and you get yours to work. You let me know how you did
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Feel free to reach out with anybody has any questions or any concerns or you name it. Don't hesitate to send me a message through Facebook, Instagram, doesn't matter. I'll get them either way. Um, about the ropes, or if there's something that you don't see on the website that you think would be good, let me know and I can certainly do that. But yeah, the code will get you 10% off. Shipping is free, and I try to stay on top of orders, so I try to get those out next day at the latest. So I really try to get these out as rapidly as I can. So I encourage people, and I encourage a lot of my scent companies I work with to get their orders in now. I've been very busy the last 2 months making ropes, and I can only imagine what it's going to be like in September and October as we get down to crunch time when seasons are about to open and everybody's like, oh, I really want to get the scrape up and running. So um, I don't know. I don't know what my deer season is going to look like this year. As far as spending time in the woods, I may be busy making ropes, but I'm trying to encourage folks to get their orders in now. And if you want to wait until then, you can certainly do that. They'll stay fresh in the packaging until you're ready to use them. But so if you do wind up waiting till last minute, that's okay. But preferably you want to get them now. And then if you get them out now, even better. If you just have them and hang on to them until you're ready to use them, that's fine too.
Definitely order early so you can make sure you get them. Because if you wait till season, you might be a couple weeks or more behind. And
Yeah, I definitely won't be able to get them out as quick. So but I do want to make sure I take some time for myself to get in the woods this year too, because that's important as well. So, but yeah, I will do my best to fill orders as expeditiously as I possibly can.
little product research too. You got to try different things and see what works.
That's right. Yeah, and please, if folks buy them, use them, and get any trail cam videos or pictures, please feel free to share them or tag me in them or tag us. Tag you, Roy, or anybody, just so that we can see your success and share that with other folks. That's what it's all about. Hunters supporting hunters, and we need more of that in today's hunting society.
Yeah, yeah. Anything we do to support, archery in any form is
Yeah,
always good to do, and always fun to do as well. It's always fun to do this kind of stuff.
absolutely.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody that's watched it and listened to it so long, and definitely you, Tom. Thank you for being on. You've been quite informative of different aspects of hunting and rope and how to use that for scrapes and that's been a lot. I'm kind of anxious to kind of try some of that stuff out and see how it goes in the area that I have because I have kind of a unique little area that I'm hunting in and um, it don't hold a lot of deer, but deer do travel through it.
Yeah, this could be a great experiment for you to see how it
Yeah,
works out. And you can always set it up, near a stand location too, because it may, that deer may come in and give you just enough time to get a shot opportunity as well. So it can be used in that regard as well.
yeah, yeah. I got a couple of spots I want to set it up and
Excellent.
try it out and see. I've got an area that they kind of travel through. There's a little corridor they travel through,
Hmm.
and I'm gonna try and get something set up there. But yeah, that'd be fun to kind of try.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, choose your own adventure when it comes to mock scrapes.
Yeah. And just a reminder, you can listen to the podcast on Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts, as well as audible.com. And you can watch the video, get some information that way on my YouTube channel, Learn to Fix It Yourself, as well as go out to the Archery Talk 101 Facebook group. That's probably the best place to go because we do have a lot of information out there. Join that group and you can watch the podcast out there as well. And it's been great talking with you today, Tom, and it's going to be exciting to see what's going on this hunting season.
Thank you, Roy. It was a pleasure talking with you as well, and I'm excited for what the future holds. And hopefully, this is the beginning of something that will continue for years and years.
Yeah, I can see you're going to have to hire somebody to help you get the ropes out.
Yeah, that would be nice. I'm sure my wife would appreciate that. She helps whenever she can, but it's pretty much me in my spare time at this point. So,
Yeah. Well, my name is Roy Canterbury, and I've been your host on Archery Talk 101. And we'll definitely catch you on the next one because these are fun to do. I don't plan on stopping them anytime soon. So we'll catch you on the next one.